the conversation's topic tonight is transgender issues. There are some studies that were brought up last week by Paul, and I think Sean has brought up a few in the online community, and I'd like to sort of address those and have Sean try to explain what he believes the studies are saying, because I'm reading different texts from the study than what Sean is claiming that they're saying. So I would be curious to know if yeah. So basically, what we want to do here, just to set the stage, is we want to seek truth together about transgender issues and try to find, what is the objective truth in terms of research on the subject. And there are obviously different perspectives out there, and we want to hear those different perspectives, acknowledge that that is a perspective, and then scrutinize it, regardless of whether we agree with it or not, in the goal of seeking truth, not in the goal of being right. We have come up with a process for seeking truth that we talked about the other week. And what I'm going to try to do is loosely moderate and also try to follow this process for seeking truth. Um, and um, and so I'm going to talk about some ground rules. Let me just close my door real quick. So I'll put this link in the chat. So who can uh who can moderate the chat? Will, can you help moderate the chat? We'll
Oh
have
yeah, okay, yeah.
no rude, like, the only rule that we have to follow tonight, and I'm going to ask everybody to follow it both in the chat as well as in the meeting, is to be polite, and to try to be calm, cool, and collected. So not get emotional, because when we get emotional, we start losing the logical, critical thinking part of our brain, and we get into the emotional part of the brain, which doesn't think rationally. Human beings are at our best when we're thinking rationally, using critical thinking skills. And so I want to keep us all in that part of the brain tonight. And once things get emotional, it all breaks down. So let me and they changed. Okay, here we go. So Will, you're a co-host now. Is there anyone else that I need to make co-host? Probably not. Um, I can make Ellen a co-host. Um, all right, and Michael. So let me share my screen with these rules. So the ground rules are: listen first, speak second. Distinguish between fact versus belief. What is the evidence and what is our interpretation of the evidence? We want to question everything, including our own views. No personal attacks. We want to critique ideas, not people. That includes not saying you have a stupid idea. That is a personal attack. It's just a veiled personal attack, because stupid people have stupid ideas. So you can say instead, I disagree with that idea, and this is why. And if you have really good evidence to disagree with that idea, then it may appear to some people as a stupid idea without you having to say it. Um, so treat disagreements as puzzles, not battles. Be curious about what other people think. This is, a nonpartisan set of rules to sort of help us seek truth together. And we want to distinguish between the types of claims that people are having. And let me,
Bernard Sales is a Zoom bomber.
Got it. Got it.
thanks. Um, and um, we want to source attribution and then look at, is there any bias in the sources that are given? Um, and we want to focus on evidence first for claims about objective reality and try to prefer primary sources over summaries, um, understand the actual research that was done on the topic, including any bias in that research or review. In the case of the CAS review, which is what people commonly refer to in this topic, that are anti-trans affirming care, gender affirming care. And Basically, we want to look at, is the source credible? Is there consensus, or are there disagreeing independent sources? Like, do independent sources agree? What is the evidence quality? Are there alternative explanations, and what assumptions are being made? We want to use a shared vocabulary. And so if you think someone's using a word differently, ask for how they define that word. And then we can talk about different definitions and we'll address them separately. Acknowledging, we'll use definition A first and then we'll use definition B second. We want to, and so this is our agreed upon process. We want to document what we learn in terms of tonight's discussion. Yeah, that's kind of the quick overview. So we also will take, we'll have a combination of hands raised, and we'll have people be able to speak up. When you raise your hand, you can start a new subject, try to keep it to under 2 to 3 minutes. And then, when you want to respond to anyone that just spoke, you can just speak out. You don't have to raise your hand. The hands raised is to introduce new topics or ask a new question. So that's the difference between raising your hand and speaking up, but everybody's allowed to speak up so that we can have like a fluid conversation amongst the group of, what are we now, 32 people. So, and it generally works pretty well as long as everyone chooses, intentionally doesn't talk over each other. So yeah. Um, so Sean, I don't know if it would make sense to address the thing that the study that you put in the chat about mental health care utilization of transgender youth before and after affirming treatment, that was run by the military. Do you want to sort of present your opinion
Well,
on that one?
yeah, if I could, Garrett,
Yeah.
with your permission, I put together a small slide deck, basically,
No,
and
no slide
by the
decks.
way, by the way, I have learned my lesson since
No
our
slide decks,
Trump
Sean.
model. Really?
No,
Okay.
no slide decks. Like, this is meant to be a thoughtful discussion and truth-seeking uh conversation, not a presentation.
Okay.
If I wanted to continue to do presentations, I would be doing the research and doing a presentation. You push back on me doing presentations. I'm pushing back on you doing presentations too. We're going to look at the actual data itself and the studies themselves, and we're going to dig into them. And I think you have a misunderstanding, quite frankly, about the study that you just shared. So I'd like to get into that because, we don't have to, but like, if you'd like to share a study that you think does not defend gender affirming care, then we can dig into that study, because I know you think you have a couple, one of which has 44 data points, which is not statistically significant. You agree. So I wouldn't suggest using that one. But the other one with a larger number of data points, I don't think says what you think it says, because very clearly in the abstract it says that the more psychotropic medication is compared to siblings, not compared to same person, unless you can find another quote in that study that says it's the same person.
Well, actually, what I'd like to do is make the case for why I have an issue, why I have some pushback against gender affirming care. And it's different than what Paul was talking about last week. And I recognize that this is a tough topic, that there's a lot of passion around this, and that most people who are very in support of gender affirming care are coming from a place of caring about trans youth, young people, care about high rates of suicide and things of that nature. My issue with gender affirming care is that the diagnostic tools that are set up for gender affirming care are actually very poor as far as accuracy. The previous research that's been done before the current model, before the current protocols, and I can point to research around this, showed desistance rates that were quite high. and there's many studies for this. The most recent one was Singh et al. In 2021.
Can you post a
Um,
link to the study?
yeah, here, I'm just going to do this.
Don't post your slide deck, post a link to the study.
Well, I'm posting a list to the document that has all of my citations in it, if that's
That
okay.
is your slide deck, isn't it?
No, it's not. I have a
Okay,
slide deck with
great.
visuals and everything that was built for a presentation. So I'm giving you let me see here. This is just going to slow this down if I have to stop and copy and paste everything, but that's what we're doing.
You just need
So,
to focus on one study. It should be one link.
well, there's multiple links that show this, Garrett. But Sing, if anyone wants to look it up, I've posted in the chat. You can look there. Sing 2020 is a recent study about desistance with minors the way desistance works is it was studying uh, young people who identified as being trans early in life, and it was studying people who went through puberty not doing affirmative care, and it was studying how many of them would continue to persist and have uh, gender dysphoria symptoms later on in life. There have been multiple studies. There have been there's a meta study that Steemsma did. Steemsma's done several of them. He did one in 2013 that has really strict analysis. He did one in, let's
Can we focus on one study at a time, Sean, so that we can actually analyze whether or not the study actually says what you claim it says? Because you're making a lot of claims here, and so far you haven't shared one link that I can see.
Well, you've asked me to, I had this all prepared, Garrett, and you're
I
telling me not
understand.
to
So
do it.
start with the first study that you were going to present and the
Okay.
assertion that you were going to make that that study is saying.
Okay. So you want me to post the Steemsa study?
And I can also say I did research this because Paul brought up a bunch of these links last time, and the research basically says that when that persistence doesn't continue from like early days, like pre-puberty, but once someone gets to puberty, the persistence is there. You know, it is a consistent thing. So
No,
um,
that's actually the opposite. When puberty is actually the thing that makes the sisters stop having trans dysphoria. I'm sorry, gender dysphoria type of symptoms. If they get through it, most young people, 88% based on the Sing study, will actually desist and actually fall into an identity of typically gay or lesbian. So what my concern is that a lot of the gender affirming care is actually doing the similar type of thing that conversion
can
therapy
you
would do to young gay
can you
people.
can you post the study, please?
There you go. Singh et al. 2021, if you want to look that up.
I don't see the study in the chat.
You don't see the citation there?
No. Is anyone else seeing it?
Let me make
No.
sure I am directing it to the right. Oh, I'm doing it to read AI. Well, that explains that. There you go. Now let me pull it up here
That's
too.
that's not a
Sing.
link to the study. If you could like actually post a link to the PDF to the study.
Here is the name of it. Let's see. Here's the citation in my document right here. Other ones that are similar.
So this is like an abstract, but not a link.
Well, I'm sorry. I had a
Oh, you don't have
presentation.
the links?
Well, the presentation
I have a
doesn't help if you
I
don't
have a
have the study.
bibliography for a document here, which, by the way, if anyone looks in the comments in the event, I've posted links to all of these documents here. Here, I'll just post the document, so if anyone wants to look at this while we go through this, they can, and I won't interrupt with that.
A quick question. Can we only do we need to always present documents and links, or can we just talk about our just own what we think?
I would like to just talk about it, but Garrett wants to
Well,
wants to pull up journals, medical journals.
Can anybody, does everybody have to do that, or can we just give our impressions?
We are all welcome to give impressions, but I also recommend backing your impressions with data and research. So, you can obviously have an opinion, but Sean was referencing research in our online community, so I assumed he was going to reference some of the similar research, but now he's moved on to something else that I haven't looked into. And so,
Well, to be fair, Garrett, I posted all of this stuff to you days and days ago, and you said that you don't have time. So,
Sean, you are not going to get me to I'm not going to research every one of your links every time, but in the community, I did respond to all your links.
Sure. No,
But if you give me a list of 50 links, I'm not going to research all of them ahead of time now.
I'm not suggesting researching everything ahead of time. I posted what my argument was going to be. I then posted a summary of what my argument was going to be. Then I posted excerpts from it. And you've kind of pushed back against every little
it's
part.
not a make again, let's let people speak their minds.
Sure.
If we want to talk about this, go ahead, Gene, if you want to share your perspective.
One of the rules I have run a meetup group called The Bridge, and one of the rules I have in there is I find citation debates to be really boring, which is what we're doing right here, where we're not actually having a discussion. We're just
No, that is not what we're doing, Sean. That is not what we're doing here.
Okay.
If you want to back up your opinion with data, which you usually do, then you need to make a citation. Now,
I have, and there's four different articles suggesting the same thing in the chat right now,
and
including
there are many studies suggesting the opposite, and more of them with better quality data from my understanding, but I will look at your individual links and fact check them, because the last one you shared said the opposite of what it said something different than what you were saying. So, Jean, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't really ready to speak now, but I will just the reason I asked that question is I think people sometimes just have, some stuff just feels that maybe not, it feels like common sense to me. And it's pretty easy to present a case just by using ordinary language.
Yes.
But other things, you have scientific study. So I just wondered.
This is the tranny debate. This is a tranny debate from earlier. The Trump versus
RTB is a Zoom bomber. RTB of Debreth.
So I just wondered, I just was asking if the discussion is only limited to that. But I will say why I came here. I came here because he's my roommate. He's living in the living room and kitchen of my art studio, which is upstairs from my apartment. And that I'm renting. I'm not the owner of it, unfortunately. And he is fanatically, I'd say it's his special interest. I have my own special interests. But he's fanatically maybe it's not the word, deeply interested in the subject. And it really does kind of relate to my own special interest, which is about data processing and different styles of data processing. So I think it can be discussed from both angles, but he's definitely on the same tape with you, probably, Sean, if that's how you pronounce your name.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and he told me, I took notes. He was going to come tonight, but he decided not to because he would have had to join Meetup. He's not on Meetup. And he only wants to be in a group where they're actually working towards clarifying this issue from, again, the perspective you are coming from. It sounds like Sean and I also am, but mine is just from common sense, not from a fanatical interest. I think he's too fanatically interested in this one topic. And by the way, if people don't want Trump to get elected, and I'm not pro-Trump, I'm a moderate Democrat, he has a much better chance of getting elected now because of these transgender stuff they're doing with teenagers. And I'll speak later, though, and give my opinion.
Well, what transgender stuff with teenagers are you referring to?
The sex change. That's what started his interest in this, and it's the interest of a lot of people that's the reason they're interested in this topic, because they think that is inappropriate. So I'm not going to...
Sex changes for adults?
No, for adults, anybody. We're all for that if they want to do it. It's their bodies. No, it's about minors. That's what started all this
posting.
Yeah.
there's a couple other aspects, such as the sports and the restrooms, but those are minor issues compared to the teenage stuff. And he's an expert on the subject. I wish I could have gotten him to come, but he's going to watch it on YouTube. And he only wants to be in a group where they're working. He's from the side of, not side, side is the wrong word, but he is, probably on the same tape as you, Sean, and I am also. And a lot of people are starting to be on. Okay, thanks.
Well, let me make the argument I think you're mentioning about Trump there, and it was something I was going to open with, in that this problem with poor ability to diagnose who is actually genuinely trans and who is not, who is actually just going to, if they go through puberty, is going to turn out to be either gay or lesbian, or also autism is a very high factor within this community of young people. The the fact that we have such high desistance rates for people who end up going through puberty, between 67% and up to 88%, which is what we have with Singh.
He mentioned that. That was one of his main points. I wrote it down, but you're saying it better than I don't know much about it.
Well, the problem there is we have a whole lot of false positives. I think young trans people, I think gender dysphoria is a real thing. And I think people who actually have gender dysphoria deserve treatment. They deserve care and dignity and respect. But if we are getting all sorts of people who are not actually trans, who are also being diagnosed under the same umbrella and are going through the puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, and are eventually leading their way down to transition, and they're not actually trans, they don't actually have gender dysphoria, I think that's where the real damage is. And I think that's also where, like you said, Trump is going to get elected because you're going to have Chloe Coles or other people like that who are detransitioners who are going to have all these, these horrible regret stories, and who make the news. If we can get the accuracy of the diagnosis better, you wouldn't have such a scandal. You wouldn't have people up in arms. And that was what my presentation was going to be about tonight, is that the accuracy just is not there. And the research shows that. And
I disagree with that strongly.
well, let's talk about that.
Hold on,
Let's talk about
Don't
that,
interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. I'm not interrupting you. You've been talking more than anyone else here. You've been talking more than everybody else here combined. And I'm pulling up the statistics to prove that. So relax, Sean. Relax.
I'm relaxed. You're angry.
I'm frustrated because you're talking over me and you're making claims that are unfounded, and you're giving a study of 139 people, which is nonsense. That's not statistically significant. A study of 139 people proves nothing but randomness. Nothing but randomness. So don't show studies of 139 people if you want to be taken as a credible source. What is actually, Lance, are you meaning to talk over me?
Expressed opposition to policies allowing transgender.
So, so basically, I would like to know, first of all, why this topic is so important to you.
Because I think misdiagnosing healthy people who don't have gender dysphoria and putting them through irreversible harm is not a good thing. I think that the effective medicine who accurately prescribes surgeries or care to people who actually have it is a positive thing. But if you're doing that to people where it's harming them, that's unconscionable.
So a 5-year study, and I can give you the source for this, a 5-year study of socially transitioned youth found that 94%, if they diagnosed as transgender after puberty, 94% identified as transgender afterwards. So puberty is the point at which, pre-puberty, that's when there's when there's low persistence. But once someone hits puberty, it's very clear that if they are trans, there's an extremely high rate that they're going to continue to be trans for the rest of their life.
Garrett, what year was that study done?
I can pull it up.
Because I think that's relevant to Sean's argument.
2022.
Oh, huh. Okay.
Garrett, are you referring to the suggestion that 95% of people who go on puberty blockers
It's
move
not about
on?
people that go on puberty blockers. It's about people who are diagnosed as transgender, is what I understand it as.
Well, because there's two
So
very
is
different.
your claim, just if I can finish, your claim, as I understood it, was people who say they're transgender, identify as transgender according to a professional, are no longer transgender very often later on in life. That was your claim, right?
My claim is before the current protocols were there, 67 to 88% of young people, if left to go through puberty, would desist from having gender dysphoric symptoms.
You're talking about people pre-puberty.
Pre-puberty, and then after
Okay.
they went through puberty, they
They
would desist from having those symptoms.
There's almost nobody that gets medical assistance pre-puberty. Almost nobody. It's a non-existent issue. You'll
You
have to
then you're
show.
then you're misunderstanding me, and you're also preventing me from showing what I want to demonstrate this. But I'll do it verbally. I'll tell you what I think you're pointing to, and what these studies where this changed is once people start to go through gender affirming care, which is changing their name, changing their appearance, changing their their presentation, how people talk to them, that number flips, and especially if they go on to puberty blockers. Once people go on to puberty blockers, young people, 95% of them persist in going through hormone replacement therapy. So going through puberty is actually the thing that keeps people will actually resolve the identity. Going through puberty blockers almost guarantees that they're going to move forward through and become go through medicalization.
What age does puberty start according to the various studies?
I mean, it's different for each person, but I
Yeah.
mean, most people know it's around adolescence.
Approximately what age are they referring to? Like
11 to 13,
Oh, 11? Okay, thank you.
10 to 13. You girls, I think, had it a little younger.
What does it mean to you, the person who was, I forget who it was, who was having the contrary prediction or opinion of this other person? What does it mean to you? If you would care to share, I'd be very interested in hearing it. Because we have these subjective meanings, these things mean to us.
Well, to me or to Garrett? Like, Garrett, why do you object to having more research done to narrow down the diagnostics, to make the diagnostics so that there are less false positives?
I obviously don't disagree with that, Sean. So making a claim, making an assertion like that, like asking a question like that is like saying, "Why did you beat your mother?" Like that's a disrespectful question to ask. So the question that you would want to ask if you have that in mind is, Garrett, would you agree with this? And then I could answer yes or no, I agree with it. You just immediately assumed that I didn't agree with it. But it's not that I disagree with doing more research. It's not that I disagree with, trying to get more accurate predictions, but understanding that people who identify as transgender, once they hit puberty and they still identify as transgender, are almost certain to be transgender for the rest of their lives. And they are very clearly helped by the largest studies and the largest majority, the statistically significant studies, not these 34-person studies that you're sending me, Sean, which are nonsense. Those are not useful studies. They add no value to anyone other than to like agree with someone's confirmation bias. Like if you want a statistically significant study, look at numbers in the thousands, right? And if you get numbers in the thousands, maybe it's statistically significant. If you look at those studies, the very clear evidence is that gender affirming care saves lives. It prevents trans people from committing suicide. It
Well,
does.
That is
It does.
this
so.
was, my roommate said something about that. He said that doctors tell parents, and I don't know what his proof is. He's not here, but and I don't know. I don't know, but he said this just last night to me. He said doctors say to parents who are, who come to them with their child who's, wants to transition, or maybe they just come to them without the child and are talking to the doctor. They said, "Well, do you want a dead child or a child who's had this, trans, whatever it's called, the gender trans, operation?" Would you
Yeah.
rather have that child or a dead child? And he said a lot of doctors say that, but that's subjective. We don't know how many
That
doctors.
that's not the claim. The claim is that in one court case, there is a claim that one doctor said, would you rather have a and I forget the exact gender, original gender, but it's like, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? And
Oh yeah,
that
right.
was
That's
and
what he said.
that was one court case. It's one claim. It hasn't been challenged in court. It is simply someone's assertion,
Yes.
trying to, make their point.
And
Um,
Garrett, that's what I asked him. I asked him exactly what you're saying. I said, how many doctors said that?
right.
And he,
And to be honest, the doctor's perspective in that court case hasn't been shown yet. So the chances are very good that that child had a very high level of suicidal thoughts, and that the doctor had a very good reason for saying that. We don't know yet for sure, but why would a doctor
right.
risk their license by making a statement like that if it wasn't true? I'm curious what you think is the reason that a doctor would
So
make
my,
something like that up if they don't believe it's true.
they could have a psychological investment, but my roommate was over exaggerating, which I did kind of have the sense of. I questioned him on that same thing, but probably more than one doctor has said that, I'm guessing, but we don't know how many. Not as many as he thinks said it.
Say that again.
Probably more than one doctor has said that, but not as many as my roomer thinks said it.
Well,
He,
let
he
me
over,
put you in the situation of a doctor. Say you're a doctor, Gene, and you see a patient. The patient says, "I don't get treated respectfully. I don't feel like I'm the gender I am. I am going to kill myself if I can't be the gender that I feel like I'm meant to be." That's a very clear, after weeks of therapy, this is what you're hearing as a message. What do you tell those parents when they say, I don't want my child to transition?
so you're thinking more than one intelligent, so I don't know if they're intelligent or not, but intelligent doctor probably did say that because it was intelligent to say
I
that.
mean, I'm asking you, if you were the doctor in that situation, what would you tell those parents?
I think I can't. Well, remember, I'm not. I'm not coming at it from as intense interest as some of the people here, but I'm not capable of. I don't know. I think that for me, this topic it's hard because what he said, and I think it's probably true because people do this with all kinds of information processing, is they will tend to slant, it in one angle or another according to what they feel about it. So
Well,
that's
why would a doctor risk their license in order to lie about their assessment of a child?
I have no idea. That's the question.
So maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they're actually giving their honest opinion because that's what's in their best interest is to not lose their license.
Well, also some of these people, and this is just a side point, I never thought about this till just now, is that people do play different cards. And some of these people who want gender transition, if they're teenagers, if they're below the legal age, could be just playing that card because that's
When
what
you
people
say
do.
playing that card, have you ever tried to be transgender when you weren't?
I'm not understanding that question.
Like,
Sorry.
why would anyone, like transgender people are bullied, they're mistreated, they're treated horribly by society, by almost everybody. And so why would anyone choose that path if it wasn't the path that felt natural to them?
Well, I didn't raise my hand, but I'll quickly say this, and I'm going to go make some lentil soup, and I'll be listening. Then I'll come back and raise my hand. Well, the answer to that quickly is that young people at a certain age are very influenced just by their peers, and they may be disturbed, whatever reason. People can hang on to different topics for different reasons, judging from myself and my own experience. I
We
mean,
have a lot of hands up. Thank you, Gene. B, go ahead.
Yeah, I honestly, like you open up with the question of why do people care about this, since it only affects 1% of the population. And I think people use this as a lightning rod issue, specifically the Christian Taliban, the right wingers, who don't want people to have choices. And they all claim to be for freedom and against government intrusion, but they want to legislate against people making choices with their children about their medical care. Like, why are they involved in this? It's only the people involved in this should be the doctor, the parent, and the child. Why are other people that are legislators involved in this? This is a medical issue, and the scientific and medical consensus is that gender affirming care is medically necessary for transgender individuals because it improves their mental health, their functioning, their quality of life, and the care should be individualized and multidisciplinary, which means it involves medical and mental health support. And the parents are the ones that are supposed to make that decision, not the government, not the Republicans. Why are these people so invested in other people's health care and choices? It's ridiculous that they're always trying to say that they don't want any government oversight over guns, but they want to legislate the shit out of people's medical care. It makes no sense at all. And the scientific consensus and multiple meta analyses show there's strong evidence for support of gender affirming care because it saves lives. As you explained, it helps people not to kill themselves.
Thanks, B. And that's why I care about it, because transgender people are a marginalized population. And when they opt into gender affirming care, the transgender person opts in. The parents, if they're a youth, opt in. The professionals that are caring for their health all agree that it is the best thing for that person. Now, should we improve science? We should always improve science. That's the purpose of science, is to keep improving it. But when the doctor, the patient, and if the patient is a child, the patient's parents agree with the care, they should be able to get that care. And right now it's blocked in half of our states. It's blocked even with the agreement of all three of those parties. That would be like someone who has huge plaque buildup on their heart, needs heart surgery, and saying, nope, sorry, you can't get heart surgery in Texas because you know what? We've decided in Texas that heart surgery is not going to be allowed. Even if you want it, even if your doctor wants it, it's not going to be allowed. And I'm sorry, but that's murder. Like, the people making that decision are committing murder. They're committing murder through policy, which is the coldest type of murder you can commit. Rami, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, do you know a group that's even more marginalized? Those who have transitioned realized that it was a mistake, and then they're ostracized by the transgender groups
So,
themselves.
so
Yeah.
Rami, why don't you start a support group for those people? If that's the people that you care about, start a support group for them.
Well, I care about all people, Garrett, including those who may be steered in the wrong direction to begin with, but you seem to have no concern for them.
I mean, I just said to start a support group for them. I actually have a lot of concern for
You
them.
mean after they've lost their ability to reproduce children, or after
After
they've had their breasts
they've
removed, or
chosen the
after
path,
they've been chemically castrated?
after
That's
they've
when your definition of care should begin.
No, I think you should try to listen with an open mind, Rami, because actually we did a
You're being
slide on this,
disingenuous,
and
Garrett,
you're
because I don't
talking
think
over
you've
me,
been listening
Rami.
with an
I'm going to
open mind
mute
throughout
you
this entire
because we're not
process.
we're not going to talk over people tonight. When someone else is speaking, let them finish speaking unless they're going on for a really long time, and I will handle that. So we did a comparison when I presented on transgender issues. Um, it's something like 27,000 people will die from suicide per year because they don't get gender affirming care from half the states that ban it, and there's something like 2,000 people that will regret gender affirming care. So for myself, I would rather save 27,000 lives and have 2,000 people make a mistake that they regret. I do feel bad that people make mistakes they regret. But guess what, Rami? Have you never made a mistake you regretted? I certainly have made mistakes that I regretted, but I'm not going to tell everybody else that they can't make the
This
decision
guy
I
sucks.
made.
This guy fucking sucks. Every single statement he makes
Charles is a
himself
Zoom
look
bomber.
worse and worse and worse.
Garrett, I know you mentioned 27,000 last time around. I looked that up. I was trying to find where you were getting that from. Can
I
you
did.
post where you were getting the 27,000?
It was like an estimate. There aren't good numbers other than making a bunch of assumptions. And so I put all the assumptions in the AI chat. So it's in the slide deck from when I presented.
So it's not, well, I looked at your slide deck and it doesn't have how you put your prompt in or how those numbers were
The
arrived.
prompt includes the whole prompt history, everything.
Well, I didn't see it. Could you post how you came to that? Or, but are you saying that you didn't come from that from a study or from any
Correct.
statistics? You
It's not from
basically
a
just
single
put a
study.
bunch of, okay, so that number is out of, an LLM came up with that number. That's not based on anything
No,
real. Okay.
when you say it's not based on anything real, it's based on a bunch of assumptions that are based on studies. And if you put those things together, that's the estimate of the number of people that have died. If you would like to come up with your own estimate, go ahead and do it and put your assertions in, and you can try to come up with an alternative hypothesis based on real data. But if you do it with studies that are based on 60 people, that's not going to help, right? That's not going to actually be a good extrapolation. I did it based on studies that have thousands of people that were statistically significant, and the chance of, and basically what I did is I took the chance of someone committing suicide if they don't get gender affirming care. How many people does this affect in the population? So it was
So,
very much study driven.
mhm.
But it was basically saying if half of the country bans gender affirming care and that half doesn't get gender affirming care, what number of people will commit suicide every year based on that policy decision? So it wasn't a complicated, you know, like out there kind of formula. It was very straightforward.
Well, the reason I ask is because you're going after me for my studies that I'm showing aren't good enough, but it sounds like you didn't have a study for this.
I
And
did
when
have
I
a
looked
study
at, when
for it.
I did it,
I
don't
did,
let me finish, don't interrupt. I'm getting to a point. I did look up the 27,000 and what the CDC says is they estimate about 1,700 suicides, which is still way too many trans people per year committing suicide, but it's a magnitude smaller than that. So, and in the whole country, 49,000 people commit suicide a year. So for 27,000, we would have to say that half the suicides of the whole US would be trans suicides. Do you stand by that?
I would have to go back to the numbers, but what I did is I abstracted the chance of like someone trying to. It was like the chance of someone trying to commit suicide or committing suicide if they don't get gender affirming care versus if they do. It was extrapolations on numbers, right? And it was extrapolations on very small percentages of the population. So there could be rounding error there, but I haven't looked up the number of suicides in the country every year. But yeah. I
Sure.
will look it up.
Yeah. I mean, the number of suicides in the country is a number we can look up for sure.
Yeah.
So if I would be surprised if half the suicides in the country were all trans people. But
How many did
I mean,
you say?
if you've got a
How
study,
many did you say?
what I see right off the top of right off the top of a search is 49,000.
Yeah, 49 or 50.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different every year.
Yeah. So let's get to Zem and
Yeah, I have more of a sort of philosophical question. So when people say they are transgender, my understanding is, for instance, let's say if I'm a male physically. If I were to be transgender, I guess I would say to you that I uh, feel like a female. But the thing is, I can only make that statement if I have met other females, and I discovered that I connect them with them on some level, and I obviously don't understand what how people feel, how women feel different from men. I'm a cisgendered male, so I don't know what that would look like, but I guess it would be by comparison. I would find growing up that women are the part of the population that I click with on some emotional, maybe intellectual level, and men just seem alien to me. And I don't know if I'm describing this correctly, but then the question becomes, what if there were no women in the world? Take a thought experiment where it's just dudes.
so
Okay, please don't interrupt. So I am born. Let's say I am what you would call transgender. So I am born, and I feel that something is off, right? That I'm not somehow connecting with the majority of the other male population, and it's only males. Maybe I do find a minority of people where I do find the connection, but the vast majority I do not. Uh, of course, I cannot call myself a woman because there are no women. In fact, there's no gender. It's a single single sex planet, right? And that's just the part I don't understand. Why do we have to insist, if you do have these feelings, why do you insist of being called a different gender? Why not accept who you are? When you say high suicide rates, yes, that's terrible because they're bullied, they're marginalized. What about having good supportive psychotherapy that teaches them they are okay? They're just okay the way they are. Because there is a similarity between gender affirming care, as you call it, and gay conversion therapy. Both are aimed to legitimize social prejudices, right? Oh, you're gay. That's terrible. Let's turn you straight. So the implication there, being gay is wrong, right? And here we have a therapy for you to change that. And to me, gender affirming care is an amplification of that. Yes, people are picking on you, because you act in different ways. This is wrong. We have to fix it. We have to do something so that sort of dissonance doesn't occur. Do you see where I'm coming from? I mean, just the very definition of it strikes me as weird. Why
Zem,
can't
that's
you be
my
a man and have these different feelings?
Sean,
and
hang
still
on
call
just one
yourself
second. Zem, have you talked to a lot of trans people about how they feel about being trans? Because it sounds like you feel like this is an alien concept.
I don't see your point.
I'm asking you a question
And what does it have to do with the argument I'm making?
because you don't understand their perspective. So I'm wondering if you've talked to them about their perspective.
I think I'm making a very logical argument.
No, you're
You
not.
can claim to be
You're let me finish because I let you finish. I thought you were done before. That's why I started talking. And then as soon as I realized you weren't, I stopped immediately. I said, that's all I said, Zem. So, first of all, we did an event on thought experiments. If you make an unrealistic thought experiment, your thought experiment about there only being one sex in the world, if there was only one sex in the world, there would be no transgender people because there's only one sex in the world. And there would also be no population because no one could have babies.
Okay.
So that's an unrealistic thought experiment. So it's not
No,
useful.
you
In
don't. You're
fact,
just
just
too
let me
stupid to
finish. Let me
understand
finish.
my.
I let
You're
you
insulting
finish.
me.
I let
Okay,
you finish. So let me finish as well. When you create an unrealistic thought experiment, the result that you come to, and I logically proved this in our event, is the opposite of the one that we should actually learn. It's a proof by contradiction, essentially. Go ahead, Sam. You're on mute. I muted you because you were talking over me.
He's not talking. I would just add to what Zem was saying there about conversion therapy at the end. That's one of my oppositions to this is that essentially we're transitioning, we're pushing forward the transitioning of many people who would end up growing up to be gay or lesbian. And I think that's a travesty.
Do you think gay and lesbian people opt into transition therapy, or are they pushed into it by their parents?
I think some of them are confused and go to see therapists, and maybe their parents, if they are gender nonconforming, will go to look at it, and it's something that's pushed forward more than others, especially when like you say, the suicide ideation is such a big risk and thing being pushed. It's out of safety that people are pushed that way, as instead of doing exploratory therapy, which is what I'm advocating.
Yeah, I mean, gay people also have higher rates of suicide, right? And I think it's fairly, I mean, call me naive, but I think it's because society rejects them. That they live a life, that many people view as contrary to the way that life should be lived by males or females. And I think transgender people have it much worse. I think it's an even more extreme level of suffering. And I don't think I need to talk to too many transgender people, Garrett, to conclude this. But the question is, how do you help them? How do you help them? And no, my thought experiment was perfectly legit. It's obviously, if you have a single gender, you would not call these people transgender, but they are people with different feelings, different sensibilities, that are not typical of the male gender. assuming that that's a single gender. They would not call themselves female because there are no females on the planet, but clearly something is different. So you're assuming that every male on my planet is cisgendered. No, that's not necessarily true at
Try
all.
to finish
They
your
have
thought.
these feelings, right? And why do we have to label them as being of the opposite gender? Why can't we accept these people's maleness? Why can't they just be male
Try to
with
finish your
just
thought,
different feelings?
Sam. We try to keep to 20 or 30 seconds when you don't have your hand up. So I have talked with dozens of trans people about this, and the best explanation that I've given that resonated with 100% of them is, do you feel like your spirit is of a different gender than your body? And the answer was always yes. And they said, I feel like I'm a man in a woman's body. I feel like I'm a woman in a man's body. I think you're saying you know what's best for these people without even understanding their perspective or where they're coming from is not a wise approach to this situation. That would be like me telling you what medical procedures to get when I have nothing to know about your health or your well-being or your wellness. I can't diagnose you when I don't know anything about you, Zem. I don't know you. So I'm not going to pretend that I understand your perspective until I've heard you out and understood your perspective. In the same way, this is nothing like conversion therapy. 50% of people that experience conversion therapy experience it as children. They do not opt into it at all in any meaningful way because they're not even legally allowed to opt into it. They are forced into it by parents who don't accept them for being homosexual. Whereas gender affirming care, 100% of kids opt into it. They wouldn't be going through it if they didn't opt into it. So this is not at all even comparable to that. Not at all. And in fact, what you're talking about is one that's against their will and the other that is by their will. They are the opposites. So your own argument actually should support gender affirming care. Jean, go ahead.
Well, I raised my hand for two different reasons. Well, first, I just want to say that people here know me. I'm in Zoom groups all the time, and not just ones on Meetup. I'm really interested in Zoom because I'm eventually going to maybe start a learning community on Zoom someday. Who knows? But I I had a pretty traumatic and violent childhood, and this is the scariest right now is the scariest group I've ever been in, which is I'm trying to grok it because Garrett, you have such good motives of having cooperation and harmony and everything. And it's so beautiful. But the affect is so scary to me of what's happening on here. And I've been on these religious groups where they're arguing with atheists and back and forth, and it's nothing.
What's
It's
scary, Jane? Help me understand what's scary.
your tone of voice, your affect, it scares me. And maybe, I need to work on that, and just the loudness and there's just violence in the air here. And so it's an important issue, and I think that disharmony and, kind of disagreement and stuff is a part of the healthy process of learning and growing together. I don't think it all can be so nice, but it's really kind of scary to me. So it must have a deep meaning,
It does. It does
yeah.
have a deep meaning.
That's why I asked you but I just want to finish the point I wanted to. There's so many points, and I'm not like my roomer. That's his main topic of interest. He's passionately interested in it, and both of us, and I'm not like him, but both of us, we would, put ourselves on the line for any adult of legal age to make any kind of changes to their body that they wanted. I'm just for that, for a person being able to do that. My whole thing is about adolescence. And I think that, about adolescence, because I know a lot of young people. Well, first of all, I worked with little children. I was trained, I had a lot of education to be a preschool teacher, but I work and talk to a lot of young people. And I just think people that age can get, really confused and easily influenced, if certain group of peers accept them, if they want to be resistant, and the reason I'm just going to finish it right now, the reason I raised my hand is I wrote it down is to say, and this is just some food for thought, I'm not saying it definitively, is a lot, and I notice my voice is even getting louder, like a lot of disturbed people get angry and will kill themselves depending upon what the resistance to a particular desire being fulfilled represents. And that's the one of, I'm interested in how information, people process information. So a lot of it's, teenagers that age are very easily influenced, and it can be thrilling, and they're just sexually coming alive. And it's just not, I just believe that people shouldn't have any kind of sex alteration or any of that hormone stuff till they're of legal age. That's my only, interest. But I just think, why, I tried to ask you before, what about this does this represent to you? Because it must represent, and it should represent something, because everything, the way we use it.
Yeah, it represents lack of fairness, and it represents basically sentencing to death children who know what's right for them. Their medical professional agrees, their parents agree, and you are trying to come in as Gene Littleby and say this child who says they are a boy in a girl's body or a girl in a boy's body, and their parents agree with them, their medical professionals agree with them. You're telling them that even though they have very high suicidal thoughts, and that those suicidal thoughts have a very high chance of being resolved if they medically transition, you're telling them, no, you can't do that.
Well,
And
I'm telling you this. It's just an idea. We're just
yeah,
speaking
yeah,
like,
I'm just talking in general. You and Sean are advocating that it should not be allowed that a child be able to get these puberty blockers, even if the medical professional agrees, even if the child agrees, even if the parents agree. All three of
yes,
them are agreeing, and you're saying, no, they shouldn't be allowed to do it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it
Yeah,
was,
and so I'm wondering why you would sentence a child to death, even though the child, the parent, and the medical professional all agree they need this care.
I
You
think we
can't,
have to go into data processing. To me, and no offense, Matt, because I do it more than you probably, is you're overgeneralizing in this topic in a way that really it feels, if I were a child, it would make me very, if you're my parent and you're doing this, not about this topic, but about any topic, I get very angry and I want to just do the opposite just to
I
spite
can
you.
tell I can tell you are getting very angry, and
No, I'm not actually.
you are, and because you said your voice was raising, you even admitted it
It's
yourself.
like
I
voice is getting
think just let me finish, Gene. Just let me finish,
I'm
Gene.
angry. Don't label me because you're
Gene, Gene, please let me finish. I let you finish. So what I'm saying is that you probably feel that sense of violence because you're hearing things you disagree with. I have good reasons for thinking what I think, and I'm addressing misinformation very firmly because I think it's dangerous misinformation. I will tell you, people have not come to my meetups because I let people like Sean on the meetup. And because I don't silence them, because I let you guys speak your mind. I've had many people tell me they don't want to come to my meetups because I'm listening to Trump supporters. I'm listening to people who are pro-Trump. I'm giving them a voice. And I've been told, I'm not going to come to your meetups because of this. I feel very strongly that we should have all ideas be heard, but I also feel very strongly that people should be able to acknowledge when they have misunderstandings. And I don't expect you or Sean to acknowledge you have a misunderstanding tonight, but I hope that as you see data that doesn't agree with your confirmation bias, that you'll have an open mind that you may actually learn something tonight. I will keep an open mind that I may learn something too, and I think we all should. You can unmute
Garrett,
yourself now, Gene, but go ahead, Sean.
yeah, Garrett, I was just going to say, I mean, what I think Gene is pointing to is, this is a meetup where it's supposed to be a discussion between two sides, why people care, why people on either side care the way they do. Yet you frame it as anyone who disagrees is basically tantamount to being a murderer, which makes it, and you're very passionate and you yell down people who disagree
I
with
didn't
you.
yell at anyone.
I felt a little bit yelled at.
Well, you
Speaking
felt
You're
yelled at. That doesn't mean
speaking
I
personally.
objectively
Yeah, I
yelled at
have to
you.
leave. Garrett, you're a fucking asshole. I don't know who let you run this thing, but I'm gone.
And as far as you say that there isn't anyone that, this is something that the diagnostics are clear, that the clinicians are very clear that this child is trans. I don't think we can say that with any type of certainty. Even the Endocrine Society, which is usually them along with WPATH, are considered to be the gold standard for trans care and suggesting things. Even them, they say that, and I just posted a quote in here, that they currently cannot predict who is going to be persisting with their gender dysphoria moving forward. And I can post several other quotes about this as well.
Yeah. Let me address that if I could.
Similarly, let me just finish here with this.
20 to 30
Similarly,
seconds, Sean. 20 to 30 seconds per, if you don't have your hand up, 20 to 30 seconds.
I thought
So
hand
I
up
want
was
it
for a new topic.
one topic at a time. So please, 20 to 30 seconds, one topic at a time, because I can't remember everything you say and address it one at a time. But your point about lack of prediction, you can't predict which surgery subjects are going to survive after surgery. Does that mean you shouldn't give them surgery? No, it's not an issue of prediction. What is shown is that gender affirming care saves lives. You don't know exactly which person the gender affirming care is going to help, but you do know that it will help the population in general. So that's the difference between what you're talking about and what is reality.
Let me respond to that briefly. It's not about whether or not the treatment will work. It's whether or not the patient has the disease that you're pointing to. If there's a heart patient that goes in, you would want to diagnose to make sure that they don't have indigestion or something else like that before you start opening up their chest. Similar here, if you can't actually predict if this person is going to grow up to be transgender and therefore have all the suicide ideation risks, you probably should find that out before you start doing major medical interventions, including some things like puberty blockers or hormone treatment.
And
That's
now
my
I'm
point.
sensing your tone of voice rising, and I'm sensing the violence from your perspective. So
Well, yes,
the point,
you've
please
cut
let
me
me
off a few
finish. Please
times.
let me finish. So the because I'm going to forget my thought. So 94% once puberty hits, 94% persistence. So we do know who is going to remain transgender with a very high level of certainty. And we also know that a significant number of those people are going to try to commit suicide. It's something like 40% of transgender people try to commit suicide in their lives. So it's a very marginalized population, and we do have a very high degree of certainty about who is at risk and whether or not they are transgender.
That the studies do not show that.
They do.
Even around suicidation, WPATH themselves has said that this is not clear. US HHS says that this isn't clear. There's also
You'll have to
the
post that.
suicide rates are not as clear. And I mean, I would love for you to post the 27,000 that you
I
quoted in your thing.
I did post it, and you're welcome to look at the chat.
So half the country that committed suicide was trans.
Again, the estimate is probably off because I agree that sounds high. But I will say that there are certainly more people that die from not getting gender affirming care than there are people who regret gender affirming care. It's a very small percentage of people that regret it.
Yes, and if we want to talk about regretting gender affirming care, that's fine. Right now, the regret rates are under 3%, and that is because to be counted as a regretter, you have to return to the same clinic that facilitated your original transition. You have to formally request reversal, and you have to begin reversing at the same clinic. It does not count people who don't return or who go to other clinics or loss of follow-up. Loss of follow-up is 36%, and they only follow people for 12 months. So I think the number is very undercounted. It's not a metric that was designed for actually determining regret. So that 3% is
Can
not something
you
you can trust.
that 3% would be from a study, and that would be how one study might have looked at it, but I don't think there's a consistent definition that includes that. If you do believe there is, go ahead and post that in the chat.
Happy to.
Because I agree with you, that's not a good definition.
But that's what people typically point to when they say there's low regret rates, and that's my point.
Well, you can post that in the chat, but I will challenge that if it doesn't seem accurate. Rami, go ahead.
Is this solution because it has a ready-made course of action and it fits with a certain larger movement being applied to children who may have issues that are really unrelated to gender dysmorphia. In other words, wider issues, deeper issues, issues that ultimately cannot be solved by going through a transition.
Are you saying that transgender people's situation can be solved without going through a transition?
Yes.
No, well,
Well,
that's not what I'm saying specifically. I'm saying is this solution being over applied in place of what it would really take to help so many people who have been run through that process.
So are you saying that medical professionals who study this type of thing and provide care about this type of thing are misdiagnosing and misapplying gender affirming care um, because and maybe fill in the gaps for me.
Well,
Why do you think they're doing that and risking their license to give the wrong care to a minor?
there are two things. One, these are people who really believe in what they're doing and they're specializing in this. And when you have a hammer, every problem seems like a nail.
Well, they're not only capable of this, right? They have different ways of handling it. And in fact, I would argue every medical professional has different ways that they help people who are transgender. And by the way, your claim does not stand up to a fact check.
Hold on.
The weep,
What
no,
does that
not
mean, Garrett?
Rami, not you. I'm talking about Sean. The Weep Jizz Amsterdam study was based on what you're talking about, but that's not a general rule that regret is only counted in that way. So I'll post that in the chat. Sorry, Rami, I didn't mean to say that that was about you.
May I help you clarify it, please?
I will give you $100 if you can help me clarify something.
Okay, let me
So
give it
far,
a
you've done the
give me
opposite every
give
time
me
you've come
20,
here.
20 seconds to help you
You're
clarify
one
it.
of like 3 people that I had to throw out that wasn't a Zoom bomber in my 4 years of doing this. But go
Okay,
ahead, please.
let me help you clarify.
Would love
If
that.
you are diagnosed with diabetes, it does not mean you don't have heart disease. You can have both.
That's
And
right.
it's not misdiagnosis to diagnose you with one or the other without diagnosing something else. So
I don't know where you're going with this, Em.
let me, so they could have other problems. And when they have a limited amount of space to fix it or limited tools because they're still kids, they believe that life would be much easier to be the other gender. I believe it's much easier to be a male than to be a female. I honestly believe that.
Well, then why don't you transition, Em?
Because it goes against the grain of my it's like
Correct. And for these people who are trans, it goes against the grain for them to not transition. So
If I
in
could,
the same way that you think that transitioning would be just unthinkable, for them, not transitioning is just as unthinkable.
can I make a 10-second comment, please?
Please, go ahead, Gene.
I wrote it down. He said it last night, and I don't know his study, but I'm sure there was one, but that doesn't mean it was a good study. He said that, and I just wrote this down because he said it. He said 70% of these children had comorbidities. But then I agree with what the woman who spoke just said. Of course, people who are troubled are gonna have different comorbidities. So that's
Correct.
not a definitive thing, but it's worth mentioning. Okay, that's it.
well, I think they say that the average population has about 2% autism, and I believe the people who identify as trans, I think it goes between like 6 and 23% of that cohort has autism. So, and what some of those studies point to is there's potentially people who are autistic and have issues with their own their body that are being grouped into this. And this is where some of the caution, where I'm urging caution in diagnostics, that we're grouping in too many people into this. And Garrett, to what I think you're pointing towards something that's about care, and I can agree with that. That this is about trying to prevent suicides and making sure that if people who need the care get it. Where was I going with this? No, the concern, though, is that to do the type of studies and research we would need to do to refine our diagnostics, we would need to be able to do control groups. We need to be able to study groups of people who weren't going through affirmative care, who were instead going through exploratory therapy, who are having watchful waiting and those type of things. And currently, that type of research is not allowed. And that's because it's considered to be unethical because of the risks of suicide. So we can't actually do the research that is needed to be done in order to get better at diagnosing and making sure that we're actually diagnosing genuine trans kids, aside from people who might be autistic or going through rough puberty or simply be homosexual. And that's essentially my argument is we need more research in order to narrow this down better.
So I think what you're saying is unless you choose to make someone who wants to transition not be allowed to transition and put them in a study with a sorry, how do you create a random sample like where you don't know who has transitioned and who has not transitioned? I don't even know how you could design an experiment that includes like random cross sections of people who transitioned and didn't. Like you can't have someone transition and not know it,
Well, right
or vice
now,
versa.
are you suggesting that whenever somebody who is gender nonconforming, who is young, comes to the doctor, that there should only be one pathway?
No one's suggesting that. No one ever
Well,
has. No one does.
okay. So with the suicidality risk, I would argue that many of these people are being put down the path towards affirmative care because ethically, to not do so is putting them, at suicide risk.
Can
To
you
your
cite a
own point,
source? Can you cite a source for that?
well, I can
Because
show that we can't do the research that I'm suggesting we do,
well,
that we can't do
what I'm
controlled
suggesting,
studies.
just let me finish. So what I'm suggesting is that people get under the care of a doctor. The doctor evaluates that child and says, is this something that might be a phase? Is it maybe like did their friends pressure them into it? Because you've mentioned that before about the high rise of females with gender dysphoria that are minors. I
Yes.
believe that that's true, right? And I think that's what doctors are doing. They're trying to assess is that's what's affecting this child. So it's not like there's one path and everyone always gets gender affirming care. It's I'm going to evaluate each child. I'm going to talk with the parents. I'm going to talk with the child. I'm going to talk with the family. I'm going to understand their situation. And only if I'm willing to risk my license, as a doctor to say, I think this child needs gender affirming care in order to keep them safe, and that I don't think they're going to change their mind, will some sort of medical intervention come about. And it's a very small percentage of trans people that are getting that.
Well, you've pointed to the medical license thing a couple of times, and I want to address it. I think it's easy to understand why most these clinicians are doing this, and it's because the standards of care, which come from WPATH, and almost all of these hospitals or therapists or doctors are using are what they're pointing to. They're going towards WPATH and Endocrine Society, which recommends doing affirmative care, which recommends doing puberty blockers and all of that. So they're standing behind that research. The problem, though, is that WPATH and Endocrine Society, I think you equated them to the NRA. They're more advocacy group than they are
I didn't
hard
research them
science.
carefully, to be fair. So I gave that example to say, WPATH is an advocate for trans
Yes.
people. So, it doesn't say that they're an advocate for gender affirming care. Now, are you claiming that the only treatment for anyone that seeks help about being transgender is gender affirming care and that no one gets turned away? No one gets told they don't need it?
That's what the standards of care currently are, is that
Can
affirmative
you
care. That's what WPATH puts out.
can you put a source for that? That every single person who seeks help for gender dysphoria or gender, because I know people that have sought
I'm
help
not going
for
to
it.
say every single
I
person.
well, I did say that and you affirmed. So
Looks like Claudius is having a problem here.
Can I just
Sorry,
interject?
I tried my bot, kill it. Sorry,
was that your bot?
that was
I
my bot.
Your
Okay.
AI packet.
I posted a couple of control groups.
Sorry.
Can you tell me how is it different that the control group that you're looking for, please?
Can
Sorry.
I just interject to explain something? Gender affirming care is an umbrella term for a range of medical, psychological, and social supports that help a person live in alignment with like their gender identity. So gender affirming care just means like it's a step-up process. First, social non-medical affirmation, changing people's pronouns, their hairstyles, their names, then mental health support, then you step up to like medical, like puberty blockers, hormone therapy, if that's what, the parents and the doctors agreed upon with the child, usually they're partially reversible. And then you step up once they go through, once they're older, they can think about surgical interventions once they become adults, like chest surgeries, and then, facial and body contouring, and then general surgery. But gender affirming care, like I said, it's an umbrella term. It doesn't mean like you have to give puberty blockers or do surgery. And only a small percentage of people go through this surgery. Most people want just to have mental health support, and then later they get blockers, and then later, once they talk to their doctors, and they might get surgery later on. But it's a small percentage of people, and I posted it in the chat, a study of like it's only 1% of people that go through, according to the study in Gamma Network, where they do surgeries in adults and in minors. Like less than 1% of, I think 1% of the people that are transgender go through gender affirming surgery, where they change their genitals. So it's
Yeah.
a small percentage of people that we're talking about. People keep confusing this. Gender affirming care, it's not only the medicine or the surgery. It's a range of support, from like social support to like mental health support that these people need, because they're constantly being bullied, because they're constantly living with the dysphoria of like their brain not matching their body, and going through all of this bullying and all of this bullshit that they have to put up with. And the Trump administration, I live in Texas, and here they ban all gender affirming care. They even ban in your chart, you can only use biological sex, you can't use gender, you can't use different pronouns. And even here, like if you want to change, if you're an adult and you want to change your driver's license or your passport, that is a felony. They said that is fraud. So even adults can't even change their fucking passport or their driver's license. So that's the problem. We're conflating a lot of things, and these people just, they can't live their lives because of all the bullshit legislation that people are passing, and they're just making their lives a living hell.
Agreed.
I agree. Affirmative care is not just surgery. And yes, bottom surgery is very rare.
Rami.
I'm posting the percentages that you're wrong from the Harvard School of Public Health.
I just posted the study, so you'll have to prove the study wrong, Em.
I just showed you the study. Can you see it?
I see your citation, but I'm gonna look at it in a little more depth.
Of course, I didn't look at it at depth either. I could be wrong as well. But
No,
this
good.
is what
I'm really glad to hear you say that.
I did not look at it. This is just came up, but I do trust Harvard School of Public Health. I'm sorry.
The 2
All right,
points.
Rami, go ahead.
One, I got to wonder to what degree some of these issues can be worked out simply by loving people as they are, where they're at, and listening to them and letting them speak out their heart. And I say speak, I'm not saying act, I'm just saying speak and explore things and be open to allowing, let's say, children, for instance, to just say everything that they would want to say and be able to be heard and know that they'd be loved and secured, whatever it was that they were exploring in their mind. That's one thing. The next thing, there are cultural examples that are brought up before children. Early in school, you might be asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a fireman? Do you want to be an astronaut? At this kind of age in which that question is asked, many children were shown drag queens reading story time. Oh, look at the colorful thing that they're wearing. Maybe I want to be like that. And can there be a certain amount of cultural imprinting that has taken place, which would result in something that would not have otherwise resulted if that wasn't held up as an example? And then I have a third.
Rami, if I could, we want to keep to one topic per time you raise your hand. So if you don't mind, raise your hand again, and then we'll come back to your third one.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, as far as like letting children speak their mind, that is definitely, like part of what is done, I think, in therapy. I mean, I would be shocked if they don't let them speak their mind. But saying that that's all that needs to happen would be like saying to depressed people that they don't need medications. And, I think that it's important to recognize that certain diagnoses do benefit from medical help, one way or another. And in the same way that SSRIs have helped people that are depressed, well, now psilocybin is supposed to help even better. And all I'm saying is that, getting medication helps different psychosocial disorders, or situations. And so I think listening is great, Rami, but I don't think it's everything. Does that make sense, Rami? That there might be more to it than just listening?
Well, actually, there's more to it than that too. Because I've heard in interviews where once their mind once they were heard to say that they want to go down that path, then that's when the clinician turned off their listening and proceeded to guide and direct the patient down their course of specialty care.
Where did you hear that? And do you have a source for that?
People who had regretted transitioning.
Okay.
In interviews.
Okay. And do you know the percentage of people that regret transitioning?
Well, let me ask you, Garrett, if you think one person has been transitioned or pushed into a particular direction that they ought not have gone, and it resulted in them becoming sterile, would that be enough cause for concern to want this issue to be brought to light?
I think if more people die than regret transitioning,
I think you've already, because you keep on repeating that point, like repeating the point somehow gives it more validity, but you yourself have admitted that was probably not a valid rate.
even if it wasn't 27,000, it's very clear that, there is a high level of suicidality. So while that exact figure may not be accurate, and I didn't cross-check it 3 different ways, I ran through one analysis. My point is that if the chance is good that someone is going to die versus someone is going to regret, even if it's 1 for 1, meaning you save a life, and for each life that you save, one person regrets it, I would say that's worth it.
Okay,
Because
and you're having to predicate that because you don't really know, which brings my third point, if I may, because you've now brought this up, and my third point is related to what you've been
No,
reading.
Rami, we have Jean with their hand up, Em with their hand up. We're going to go to them one point at a time, please, for everybody. I forgot to give that, I think, or maybe I did say it, but people didn't hear me. I'm not sure which, but either way, I'll put it on me and say, I'll say it now as one comment, 1 point per one comment or question. I did say it. So, Jean, go ahead.
Well, it's hard. Sometimes different ideas kind of, comprehensively making a point and not just being a literalist, and not all literalists go to black and white processing, but it's sometimes necessary to process data comprehensively. That's my special subject, my passionate interest. It's necessary to put in, ideas and approach a little bit from, you can give a picture that way. Whereas you just say literally by studies, sometimes that doesn't work as well, or it could work better, depending. So I wanted to make a little point because you said a question about the percentage of desistance, but I don't want it to be my whole message. It's just 3 words. He did. I wrote this down last night. I don't know. I just wrote down gender-desistance 80 to 90%, but I don't know what desistance he was talking about. If it was just desistance of being trans or desistance of people who had surgery. It couldn't be desistance of people who have surgery. That's too high a number. But anyway, I could call him up and ask him. But
Gene, that's
Sure.
what I was talking about at the beginning. That's people who, if left to go through puberty, would not continue
yes,
to have the same
that's what he was
feelings.
talking about. So basically, but the reason I raised my hand, I just was answering your question, Garrett, which I don't know if that answer is accurate, but that's what the guy told me, and I wrote it down. He's fanatically interested in the subject, I would say. It's his passionate interest. Um, so basically, I'll tell my own sexual experience. When I was like 12, junior high is 12 and 13, and where I grew up. And I remember going to a dance. I must have been probably 13, but I may have been 12. We, had a couple of dances, once a year, twice a year. And I remember dancing with someone and a boy, but it doesn't matter, could have been a girl, and feeling such strong sexual energy and so turned on. And it was just new to me, and it was so powerful and so real. And I was a disturbed person, but there was no, I had my outlets, poetry, writing, and whatever. And my mother wasn't always violent. So I had my different outlets, dysfunctional. But then when I went to, I did have gender dysphoria to some degree. I don't, or whatever. But I think that if there had been groups of people in my school, well, I was used to be really good looking. And for some reason, the most popular girl in the school picked me for her best friend. I don't know why, because I was kind of an autistic nerd, but she picked me. And there's this autistic guy got elected president of the junior class. He invited me to the prom. I wasn't even attracted to him. But anyway, I didn't have to need to go to other groups. But I remember wearing white socks, which were out of style, and deliberately wearing them to separate myself apart and going to sit in the lunchroom with children who were the rejects. They had in their own little special room. And I just did it because nobody was seeing me as an autistic poet or whatever. So this can happen with young people. They're so vulnerable. And when the sexual energy is so strong and you don't know what's going on in the homes, and and it's a way of asserting themselves. It can mean different things to different people. So I think to make this, I want 10 or 20 more seconds to make this discussion a little more, to open a little more doors here from both the angles. It might be necessary to think of what things represent to people, and not just think of it in such a black and white way, because to a young person that age, that can be they can form their whole mechanism around something that's just basically they're resisting or they're feeling included in a certain group. So that's what they're just too young to change their bodies. A person over that age, around 20 or whatever, if they want to do it, I'd fight for their right to do that, But I think a lot of people who are, what you may see, Garrett, as the opposite side are really on your side in more ways than you realize. Not side, but I don't know how to use the words, because I certainly am. It's just that my whole thing is the young children, when they're too young and too confused, and a lot of them are from disturbed homes, and as a lot of children are. And so that's my main interest in the subject. And then around data processing is an interesting subject, and it is polarizing our whole political apparatus. And so people are going to go more.
Yeah.
Democrats are going to go independent because of that, and they're going to vote for,
Well, why? Why? Help me understand this, Gene. Like, why is this like we literally just started a war in Iran. Trump has made $1.5 billion off being president. Why does, Trump has pardoned the insurrectionists that tried to kill all representatives that opposed Trump, and he pardoned them all. Why is this the issue for people? Like, if anyone has an explanation for that, like this is, while it's important to me, it's not even one of the top 10 issues for me in terms of who I vote for president, has nothing to do with that. I just think that policy wise, we should let people get the medical care that they feel like they need, that their doctors feel like they need, if they're minors, that their parents feel like they need. I don't think we should be blocking people from getting the medical care that they want.
you've made that's a reasonable question, and that is to me one of the few things that has happened on this group tonight, not talking of you, but just generally speaking, myself included, that's in the nature of genuine inquiry. Yeah, why? That's a very interesting question, which I'll be thinking about. So, but it's just that young people a certain age, that's all my personal interest in it. It just seems wrong to me. I wouldn't vote for Trump because of that alone.
I have a question for Jean. I really sympathize with your story that you told, but I'm wondering, you said that in a way you experienced gender dysphoria, and I was hoping that you would elaborate on that.
Is it if it's okay with Garrett, or I could raise my hand again?
Yeah, I didn't understand how you experienced gender dysphoria from that story.
Well, when I was 18, I thought of becoming a lesbian, but I imagined myself wearing men's clothes. But I think to me it represented self-assertion. And just I'm not speaking of everybody who does it or anybody even, but just in my particular case. And then when I was in college, I'm a freshman in college, my roommate, I went away from home. And my real name isn't Jean because I have a stalker, but I think it's just an assumed identity. But my roommate had the same name as me. We'll just call her Jean. But I had a more unusual name than Jean. So they called it, I was pretty small and thin, but she was very petite. They called us Big Jean and Little Jean. And I remember laying in bed, my own little bed, we had a double beds, being attracted to her. And I do think most people are bisexual, but whatever. But I couldn't become a lesbian because I was afraid if I did, men wouldn't like me, which is very immature reason for not being a lesbian. But then I, grew out of it, and I'm just mainly attracted to men, and I just rejoice in my femininity. And that's the path I chose to take. But I wasn't confused in the way I'm talking about my gender identity when I was, an adolescent, because I was just whatever I was trying to be. But
yeah, so
people work these things through sometimes.
To clarify, gender identity and sexuality are two different things. Gender identity means that
Can you move away a little bit from the phone? It's very difficult to understand you.
Yeah, your microphone is it sounds like you got a blanket in front of it.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Through the blanket.
Great.
It's not that we can't hear you. We can hear you. The way you're coming out is very difficult to discern the words that you're saying, especially for us who not native speakers.
I can hear her pretty clearly. Not crystal clear. I do agree that it's a little muffled, but I can hear her just as easily as I can understand them with her accent.
Yeah, I can hear her also.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, B.
Yeah, sexuality and gender identity are two different things. Gender identity means how you see yourself, and people that have gender dysphoria, there's a disconnect between what their heads and their bodies are telling them. Their heads tells them like biologically I was born a boy, but my brain tells me I'm a girl. And that is what causes a lot of distress for people. That's what we call gender dysphoria. Whereas when you're attracted to people of the same sex, that would say, you're a lesbian if you're a woman, or you're gay if you're male. That is just like sexual attraction, which is very different from gender dysphoria. And I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and also I myself am bisexual, and I've known since I was really young. But a lot of people, especially young people, middle school, high school, even elementary school, a lot of people will go through an experience of exploring their sexuality, and they will be curious about being a lesbian or gay or bisexual or whatever. A lot of people, that happens to a lot of people. I don't know if there's statistics surrounding it, but I would say at least half of everybody, especially people who grow up in the West. And yeah, I wanted to second what B said. There's a difference between gender dysphoria and also sexual identity. Gender dysphoria would be more like you're uncomfortable with having a vulva, or you're uncomfortable with having breasts, or you are uncomfortable with having a feminine face. Like it just doesn't feel right for you, and you wish that you had a different body. But also, I think gender dysphoria can also be confused with body dysmorphia. So wanted to say that.
Thanks, Kate. Go ahead.
Actually, I'm really glad that you spoke right before me because that answers my question, that your question to me. I didn't feel uncomfortable in my body. I just wish I was a boy because the life was easier, but I feel very comfortable in a female body. I love my breast. I love everything about my body. I just, you don't have to go through birth and many other things. That's what I was trying to tell you earlier when you said, they feel the same way. That's number one. Number two, I don't remember if Sean or Ami said that, but it dawned on me that that's a great explanation. They just didn't pursue it all the way. When you were a little kid, when you were 2 and 3, and people ask you, what do you want to be? What did you answer?
2 and 3.
Garrett? I'm sorry?
When I was 2 and 3?
Yeah, when they said, who do you want to be when you grow up?
You remember when you were 2 and 3, Em?
Yes.
I don't know anyone that remembers when they were 2 and 3.
How about 5?
I've got a weird admission. When people ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was like 5 or 6, I said I wanted to be a gorilla because I had seen
Exactly. That's the thing. When they ask me what I want to be,
Where are
I
you
said
going with this, Em?
that when the kids don't, when they say they want to be a teacher, firefighter, whatever, they have no idea or no comprehension what it entails. For some of them, especially when you're 2 or 3, it's just a word that means absolutely nothing. I think to me, maybe not to you, but to me, it's identical when, a 8-year-old or 10-year-old or 12-year-old says, I don't want to be a girl, I want to be a boy, or 5-year-old or 7-year-old. It is true that kids go through, I'm shocked to which degree kids go through their sex identification for themselves. I was talking to some of my friends, I was like at a little party, and they were much younger than me. And they said, well, in Lexington High School, everybody had bisexual experience. I said, everybody? And they said, well, at least the girls all did. I was stunned that and it's not in the West, by the way, it's as east as you can possibly go. Like everybody knows where Lexington is because you study it in school. That's where American Revolution happened, right? So it is very this is the danger of the society having it prevalent and accepting it. Then everybody else starts believing that that's okay and start experimenting in a ways that are not positive for the rest of their lives.
I'm thinking that we might be getting a little bit confused with our comparisons because your job, your career, like most people don't know what they want to do until they're whatever age.
Yet, and yet, when they're 5, they all answer what they want to be, right? Every 5-year-old has answer, including Sean. Answer he wants to be a gorilla.
My point that I'm making is that the career that you want to do is separate from your identity as a human being.
Do you think when Sean answered he wants to be a gorilla, he meant as a career?
I kind of did.
Okay.
But
I mean, as a kid, I didn't know any better.
Career is separate from your identity of who you are as a human being, because you could argue that somebody's career could be a huge part of their identity, and I agree with that. But also, like, you can still be you and have a different career, you know? So I'm thinking that some of the comparisons that we're making here might not be so helpful to the arguments that are being made because they don't necessarily correlate. You said that it would be identical. Somebody deciding on their career is identical to a kid deciding on their gender when they're young. I disagree with that.
I understand and I respectfully disagree with you. I think for the child's mind, it's not a whole. If child is able to say that I want to be a gorilla for a profession, then I will argue that for that child, it's not very different. I understand that you don't think that.
How many trans people have you talked with this about?
Dozens, because I belong to. Have you ever heard of Less Wrong?
Yes.
And that was another thing I wanted to mention to you. I have no problems of being wrong. I'd rather be wrong and proven that I'm wrong.
I would
And
love to
change my-
believe you, Em. I would love to believe you. So when you spoke with those trans people, did you have a high level conversation about, a topic, or did you actually ask them whether or not they knew from an early age that they were trans?
I have I'm very nosy as you see. I ask you what you
Yes.
wanted to be when you were 2 or 3. I ask every single one of them at what age. I didn't say the other things that you asked me, but I did say at what age did you know you didn't want to be the gender you're born? I didn't ask that way. I said if they were like a girl, I would say, at what age did you know you wanted to be a boy, or vice
Right.
versa. It was very specific, not like,
And what was the
so,
average age that they said?
there was no average. Most of them would say very young, and I would say, well, how did you know? And then they would give examples but they would immediately, almost every single case has jumped to a much older age and say, but when I was 20, I'm like, yeah. But what about when you saying that you knew it when you were 5? What was the symptoms? Could not get a single answer.
I mentioned before that I'm bisexual and that I knew from a very young age. I
How
knew
did you know, may I ask?
it starts with curiosity, honestly. Curiosity of like, I don't know, everybody like um uh but
How do
anyway.
straight people know that they're straight? They just attracted to the people. You don't ask straight people like, "How do you know you're straight?" They just
I can tell you how I know how I was straight.
Anyway, I think in elementary school, a lot of us start developing crushes, start getting curiosity, about, for most people, the opposite sex. Um, and a lot of people will say, like a lot of women especially, will say that they had a girl crush at one point. And the question is that helped me solidify where I was at in my sexuality is, do I want to be her or do I want to be with her? And there's a difference. Um, so my curiosity started in elementary school, and then I figured out for sure when I was in early high school. I think a lot of what they mean by I knew, but then I knew for sure. It's like I started having curiosity. I knew at this point that there were things about me that I did not like and that I wished were different. And then later on in life, they knew for certain that they wanted to be a different gender. I think that's what they mean by that, just to hopefully kind of help you be less confused.
I'm
Also,
very confused because it never occurred to me that I want to be her or I want to be with her. Neither one of those both thoughts is not like, I didn't know people just think like that until you just said it.
so Em, I have a question. You said you're very open to being wrong, but you
Yes,
also said that you don't believe that trans people know that they're trans at a very early age. Am I right?
yes.
And then you also said that you spoke with 20 something trans people, all of whom
More
told you
than
that
20. I didn't say 20. I probably spoke
I
to over
said 20
100.
something.
I
And
said over 100 probably.
okay, so you've talked with over 100 trans people.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes my point better. And they've all told you that they knew from a very early age that they were
Mm-hmm.
trans.
Mm-hmm.
What is
And then
making
I would
you
ask, and then I
not
would ask
change
them
your
just,
mind on this subject when you've had over 100 trans people tell you they knew that they were trans from a very early age? Why do
mm-hmm.
you still not believe that? Why do you
I'm
believe
trying
that like all of them or most of them were lying to you?
they're not lying. It's just like with Kate. I say to Kate, how do you know how did you know from your curiosity? Like, I'm curious what it is like to be, I don't know, a physicist as a kid, but I didn't want to be a physicist. I was just curious. I'm curious, how men think, but I don't want to be a man. I'm just curious how you perceive the world in a different way. And I asked Kate the same question. You heard me. I said, how did you know in elementary school, when it started with curiosity, that you want to kiss girls as much as you want to kiss boys or whatever. I don't want to, simplify to the point of ridiculousness, but like, how did you know? And I did not
you're not answering my question.
answer the same way that they did. And if you noticed, even if after I brought it up, Kate still did the same thing they did. But when I was in high school,
Yes, but she tried to explain the distinction, and it doesn't seem like you were listening to Kate because she gave a very articulate distinction between the curiosity and the I think something is true when I'm very young, when she was very young. And then she said it really solidified in her head when she was older. And she said it very clearly. I'm saying it very clearly. But if over 100 trans people have told you that they knew they were trans when they were young, and you still think they're all wrong, maybe you should question
I'm
yourself a
not
little
saying
bit.
that I did not say they're all wrong. I said not a single one of them were able to explain to me how did they know when they knew at a young age that they didn't want to be a girl, they didn't want to be a boy.
And is it possible that you weren't listening carefully? Because I think you just didn't hear what
Anything's
Kate said and
possible.
what I don't think you heard what Kate just said or what I just repeated that
I
she
heard
said.
exactly what Kate said. I can
But
repeat to you what
you still go ahead and repeat it.
Kate said. There is a difference between wanting to be them and wanting to be with them.
That was not her point. Nope. Missed it. Missed it by a long shot. Not her point.
Well, it was a
She
point
did
that I
say
made, but
that. It
that's
was
not
a
the
point, but it
specific
wasn't
point.
that point. You didn't listen, Em. Like that's the problem. You have to listen with an open mind or you don't
I
learn.
did.
You
If I didn't
didn't.
listen, I wouldn't be
You
able to
didn't
repeat it.
because you couldn't
You
repeat it.
didn't repeat it.
You
Speaking
didn't
of
repeat it. We're both telling you Kate is the one that made the point, and I asked you to repeat Kate's main point, and you failed.
people will have
You
stories.
failed.
I could make a 10 or 20-second comment.
Go
I
ahead.
had a story, which I told to many people when I was in my 20s and 30s, that I never smiled until I finally learned to smile, maybe when I was around 40 or something. And that was my story. And then I was looking back at old pictures, and there I was. I was even in the newspaper teaching arts and crafts to a whole class of children, and I had the most beautiful smile on my face. It was just a story that I told. That fit in with the way I was representing things to myself. I think this conversation would be open a lot more doors if we looked at what things represent to people and how that can work and how I can.
I'm curious. I'm curious if my question to M made sense to other people. If you have 100 people that are trans tell you that they were trans when they were children, but you still don't believe that those people knew that they were trans when they were children, is that a problem with the trans people not knowing that they were trans when they were children? Or is that a problem where the listener is not listening to the trans people?
It could be both.
I'm curious what Sean thinks. So, Gene, help me understand
sure.
the perspective where all those 100 trans people are wrong.
It could be both. It could be a little,
Explain, Gene.
because one thing will represent, speaking from my own experience of psychoanalytical theory, of which I'm pretty interested in for a long time, and my own self-psychoanalysis, things can represent the story, the defense. I'm not saying that this all has to do with defense structure, but the person has to go where it feels good, because the pain of childhood, our parents are animals, even the nice parents. And the creative, intelligent child will form its defense structure to not process that trauma, and then other things will represent it. And when a person finds relief from it, which I found in different activities, the people have different ways. It could be in one's sexual orientation, it could be in anything, a romantic relationship, collecting something, anything. Because a transitory object to a child, it's a little doll, will represent.
Try to finish your thought, Gene.
Yes. Okay. So that the way things represent play into it. And as far as doctors, different topic. I'll raise my hand again. Doctors always being so.
This is about the trans people answering whether or not they were trans as children. That
They don't
I didn't
know.
hear you. I didn't hear you address anything related to that. But let's go to Rami because he has his hand up.
I said representation. They may not know that maybe their story.
So hundreds of trans people, thousands of trans people are wrong about when they knew they were trans.
No, not wrong.
Not all of them, I wouldn't say.
It's about story. It's not about wrong. It's hard to explain. Okay.
And you asked me, Garrett, so I'll briefly answer. I think what Em was pointing to is that young kids don't always know definitively about things like that. Some of them are confused. Some of them are playing in imagination. Some of them are exploring. And some of them are right. to your point. And the problem is we can't tell which ones are which.
The trans people looking back on whether or not they were trans aren't young people anymore. They're people looking back on their younger days, with hindsight being 2020. So
You're
these are
right.
not young people that you're talking to anymore. They're
You're
people
right.
who
And
say, I recognized at an early age that I was X when I was 5 or 6. Like I recognized that in retrospect. So I agree with
hindsight,
you, Sean. A 5 or 6 year old, I don't think should be getting hormone blockers because they don't. No 5 or 6 year old gets hormone blockers. People don't get hormone blockers till they're in their puberty age. Like,
I agree.
so like this whole point is that 94% of people, once they get to puberty, persist to have that gender dysphoria. But let's hear from Rami because he's had his hand up patiently, and then you're next, Sean.
Well, before I bring up what I raised my hand for, I'm curious to know if Kate would like to restate the point that because she made more than one. So, what is the primary point of your prior statement, if we may have that one?
Did I restate it, Kate, correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it was stated and restated, and still, Rami, I think you didn't hear it, even though Kate stated it. I restated it. Em also didn't hear it both of those times. And at that point, I have to say, I don't think you guys were listening.
Okay,
Can somebody besides you and Kate repeat what she said? Because I don't think any of us heard it any differently.
Right. Please.
Did anyone hear what Kate stated and then I restated about when children are 4 or 5 and say something, and then when they're 20, they say, oh, and then I realized more firmly?
Well, I think you're pointing. So you're saying that older people looking back, after they realize their actual identity, when they're an adult, realize I always was this way, right? Is that what you're pointing to?
That they realized they had inklings of, I think I'm this way when they're 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. And then when they got to be 20, they were like, nope, that's definitely it. So
Yes.
Sean
And I
just
think that's.
restated it again.
But the problem is I never got
Yes.
to talk to those people who changed their mind, right? I
Yeah,
only got
that's yeah, that's it. That's the thing. You won't if someone thought that way and then and then became heterosexual and it never became an issue. Well, you would never look back and say I thought that way. That memory would probably be gone, right? Like it wouldn't be as strong.
The studies actually cover that, and that's where 94% of people, once they hit puberty, they persist as being transgender once they hit puberty. So the studies actually do cover that. It's not unknown science; it is known science, and it's 94% persistence from the
Provide
point
us with
where
these
there could
studies.
be medical intervention.
Yeah, can you please post the studies you're referring to with this, because all of the
I did post it
studies,
earlier, but I can post it
yeah,
yet
if you
again.
just yeah, you
Can I
mind doing it again.
interject?
I wasn't here earlier. Can you post it again, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I interject, please? There is this very famous transgender girl. I am Jazz. She has a TV show on TLC, and I'll post the link.
Mm-hmm.
But Barbara Walters interviewed her when she was about 5 years old, 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And back then she knew, that she wanted to be a little girl and she was born a boy. And, her parents took her to the doctor. And one way the doctor explains why these children persist with, saying that they want to be a girl is they're insistent, persistent, and consistent. So throughout, her adolescent life, she went to the doctor and, consistently said like, oh, I feel like I'm a girl, but, I have a boy's body and I want to be a girl when I grow up, but I have a boy's body. So this is how you build a relationship with your parents or your doctor. And her parents were really concerned because she told them that she was a girl and she wanted to be a girl when she grew up. And they took her seriously and went to the doctor and talked to them about this. And she has a TV show, I Am Jazz. And now she's an adult, and looking back at the footage, she looks back at the footage when Barbara Walters interviewed her. And she was like, yeah, I knew back then that I was a girl, but society and everybody tells me that I'm confused, and this is what happens to a lot of these children. They are confused because society is telling them all the time, like, no, you're wrong, you need to conform, and you
Yeah.
need to do this, and their parents are trying to help them, and the doctors are trying to help them, and they feel very distress about the situation, that their brain doesn't match their body, and
Where
then
the
society
should
is like
thought be.
bullying them all the fucking time,
Yeah.
and that's why they want to commit suicide, and their parents and the doctors are like trying to help them off the ledge by getting them gender affirming care,
Yeah.
and this is the
Try to finish your
problem.
thought, B. So I agree with you, B. I also think that what Rami said is a key part of this, which is, give people the feeling that they can be themselves and be their authentic selves. So I really appreciate that Rami said that earlier. And I think that's a key part of it. I don't think it's the only thing. I think the gender affirming care matters too. And studies show that it does. But let's let Rami go. And then we're not going to have time for everybody tonight. Um, so Rami, go ahead.
All right. Let's say we're 15 or 30 years into the future, and transhumanism has progressed to the point where the people reading the stories are half human, half dolphin, and some kids say to their parents, "Oh, I really like that story, and I really like that storyteller, and I would like to be a transhuman dolphin too." And then later, they stick with that position and claim that they will kill themselves if their parents do not transition them to be part dolphin. Is that something where they're going to be arguing about sometime after that phenomenon takes place?
I want to be half dolphin too.
I think Rami, are you basically comparing the idea of being transgender to breeding across different genetic species in order to
No,
try to make the concept of transgender like ludicrous?
no, I'm not trying to make it ludicrous, even though it is something like an argument absurdum.
It
I'm
is
saying
actually, and it's
it is,
exactly what I talked to
right?
you about the guy that said I was an asshole. If you create a thought experiment that's completely like science fiction, or not science fiction, because science fiction often comes to be real, but completely unrealistic, what you end up doing is proving the opposite of what you intend to prove. And so by making that seem absurd, you're actually showing support for transgender affirmative care, because the whole idea, you're practically vilifying the idea of transgender people in general
No,
right now.
I'm not doing that, Garrett, and I don't appreciate you trying to frame it as though I am trying to do that. And in this case, you have not listened because you have missed my point. My point here is the fact that the child is now claiming that they will commit suicide if they are not transitioned to become partial dolphin.
All
I mean,
right,
I think a
but you're
stronger
you're
argument there
you're
is,
saying that to try to make it seem absurd that someone should be able to transition to be part dolphin. But if you were in a society, which your scenario was, you're in a society where half of people are part dolphin, right, Rami?
No, not half the people, just certain highlighted people.
I mean, again,
I
this is an
he's
unrealistic thought
No,
experiment,
it's not,
and
No,
Garrett.
I think. Wait,
I
I
honestly, I
think.
was not joking.
And let
I
me
honestly
let me
want to
let
wait
be
a
let
a
second.
part
Alan speak.
dolphin.
He's
Wait a
It
barely
would
second.
be
Wait
spoken.
a second.
amazing.
I'm going to
And
mute
wait a
you.
second. I think what's going on and where we're at and what's happened over the past so many like fairly recent time is technology is enabling us to become whatever we want. And that's the point I think that Rami's trying to make. That at some point in time we will be able to change our genetic disposition to become half dolphin, mutate into whatever we want. And the question is, where is the line that we draw with that transhumanism into machines? And I'm not arguing either way. I'm just saying, yeah, that's going to be something we're going to have to face.
I
Right
would
now,
focus
it's
on that
still
moral
within.
question when we get there. We're not there yet. We
Okay,
are we
But
are at a
but
place
this
where
is a
there have been
trial.
transgendered people for thousands of years, and we still haven't become socially accepting of them, even though they've existed for at least thousands of years, probably since the beginning of humanity. And yet we still have people vilifying them and comparing them. I'm not going to go there again, but vilifying them one way or another. And I think
I
we
mean,
should start following Rami's advice and being more accepting of them.
Well,
Yeah.
Garrett, has anyone here been vilifying them? Has anyone here been saying that trans people are awful people and they're some type of bad thing?
I basically would consider saying that you know better than a trans person, their parents, and their caregivers, saying that you know better than all three of those people when they have consensus is basically like being disrespectful to all three of those parties because you're saying you know better than all three of them.
Okay.
Can
No,
I
I'm saying none
clarify,
of those.
Garrett, for
Okay.
1 second?
My point
You're
really
saying
has
all of those people about a decision that impacts their life, their child's life, and their patient's life, they're all wrong. Every single one of them.
well,
Garrett, can I clarify it? They're not wrong for themselves, but
They're
I
not making
prefer
the
to,
decision for you, Em. They're
just a
making the
second,
decision for themselves.
just a second, but I prefer to live in a society where people do not become, even though I would love to be half dolphin because it would be amazing. I can
Great,
understand.
I'll make it happen, Em. Just give me enough money, I'll make you half dolphin.
It would be
I am up to
amazing
that
because I would
challenge.
understand the dolphins
And I
on
know
top of
you're a very
humans.
successful
I
Republican,
can
so I
swim in the
guarantee you have
water.
billions of dollars. I will make you half dolphin
It
before you
would be
die.
amazing if I could possibly do that. But I would prefer to live in a society where people do not change who they are when they are born, because it produces a climate in a society that is very detrimental to societal survival.
Then go to a country where that happens, Em, because there are lots of them. In
No, I
fact,
can fight.
your home country would probably be one that does that, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it
Go to
doesn't
North
actually.
Korea.
Shots
Go to North
fired.
Korea or Russia.
I'm not from Russia.
That's not what I said.
No, somebody else said Russia. I couldn't understand what
I
they were
don't think
saying.
the primary point has
Well,
been.
for what it's worth,
We
Iran
have to close
actually.
down. It's 5 after 9. So I got to put my kids to bed. I do appreciate the spirited debate. I did get emotional early on. I think I calmed down. I am very frustrated because I don't see listening. I literally ask people to restate the argument they just heard and they can't do it. That's not listening. And I think we're going to have to slow things down in our future discussions to make sure that people can use reflective listening and restate back what people said. I do this, and I don't know if you guys notice me do this, but I say, I think what you said is this. And when I say that, it's because I'm showing that I actually listened to what the person just said, and I'm restating it back to them as if I understood it. And then they can say, yes, you understood me, or no, you didn't. Right. And I
So
think we all need to practice doing that a little bit more to show that we're actually listening to each other.
I think it's a great idea, but every time you restated what I said, you've changed what I've said. You've not once, when you repeat, and I appreciate you trying to repeat it, but every single time you change what I said. It was never what I said.
I think you don't like the way that it sounds when it comes back to you, but if you want to clarify what you actually meant versus what I said, I would be glad to be corrected, Em. And I really am
I
trying to
would be glad
understand
to
you.
do it. Usually when I try to correct you, you kick me out.
No, I kick you out when you speak over other people, whether it's me or anyone else. Those are the only times I've kicked you out, and it's been like twice. But you have been complained about by numerous people, numerous people, because
Because
you
I
talk
don't.
over people, you're aggressive, you're rude, you're disrespectful. I want you to be here, Em. I want to hear your perspective, but I want you to learn to be polite. And I know that's hard because wherever you are in work, I'm sure you're very successful in your career and you get to bully anyone you want. This is not a place where you can do that.
I'm not trying to bully anybody. I'm trying to clarify
I
when
don't
you
believe you're
say.
trying to, but you are doing it.
Okay, so you said that you cannot hear me. You can hear you can. Am I as difficult to understand as a bee? Am I not coming clear? Or I would like to know that.
You're hard to understand because of your accent. I don't know how many years you've been in this country, but for someone who seems to be all American, you're hard to understand.
Okay, I did not know that that I'm hard to understand. This is the first I ever heard.
I
Well,
can
guarantee
understand
this
you
is
now.
not the
Yeah, I
first
can,
that you've
I can
understood. You are just as hard. You are just as hard for me to hear as B.
Interesting. I will try to be more clear in that case. The other thing I want
But
you to know that I'm one of those, whatever you call people, January 6ers who were there. And there was nothing, none of the shenanigans that we're being accused of was going on there. You are extremely wrong.
and there were court cases about this, and
Yes, and
you
they were
being
all
there
wrong.
doesn't
My
prove the
friends went
courts.
through those court
You
cases.
being there doesn't prove the court's wrong. You have your opinion. You're welcome to have it.
I was
But the
there.
courts, I understand you were there, and you were not in the courts where the evidence was given
I
from
was in a
security
court when
cameras all
evidence
over the
was given.
place. You were in all of the January 6th
No,
court
I'm not
hearings.
all, just two of my friends.
Totally off topic.
Yes, completely off topic. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for the spirited conversation. Thank you for those that tried to listen. I appreciate that, at least as a starting point, and I hope we can do more reflexive listening in the future.
Thank
All right.
you, Garrett.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.